Right, guys, you can tell by this video that it's going to be quite a controversial video, so I'm just going to break down ice here. Should Nintendo just put their games on Steam? It's going to be this is obviously going to be a discussion video. Obviously, I know people are going to be already commenting and say no. But let me explain my reason of why I'm for and against the idea. So, if you don't know, Nintendo has had a war with piracy and like people like using emulators to download their ROMs and stuff for a long time. Now, to me, the most obvious way to deal with this situation would be for Nintendo to actually make the games available on Steam, so people didn't have to pirate them, you know. And for that case, you know, Nintendo would obviously get the sales, obviously, for these games. They'd also be able to actually, you know, provide another line of revenue for their platform. However, the reason they've not done it is quite simple. They know their games, you know, their games are the reason people will buy a Nintendo console. If their games are available on Steam, then no one's going to buy a Nintendo console. And when you compare Nintendo to like Xbox and PlayStation in that regard, Xbox and PlayStation have made so many of their titles available on Steam and Epic Games and all those other places that, to me, in my opinion, it kind of makes the whole experience of owning an Xbox or a PlayStation console not really that worth it. Now, I know with Nintendo people argue like the price of Switch 2 is ludicrous. I understand that. But I'll argue as well that with Xbox and PlayStation, that you ain't really got much of a reason to buy those games if you've got a PC that's capable enough of playing them, or you have a Steam Deck. Like, there's no real reason to buy an Xbox or a PlayStation now, because you can get a lot of those games on Steam and on the Steam Deck, and it's just easier. Now, with Nintendo as well, you also got to think if they put their games on Steam, they'd be directly feeding a competitor, because they'd be putting their first party software that sells Nintendo consoles. By the way, this is like the whole reason people buy Nintendo consoles is to buy their first party software. They'll be putting them on a Steam Deck and making them run on a Steam Deck, which would make people want to buy a Steam Deck over a Switch 2 or a Switch, which obviously would eat into the console sales, which Nintendo also profits off the console sales for the Switch and Switch 2. So I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, that is also another major factor on why they haven't done it. Now, like I said, there is actually an advantage to putting your games on Steam if you're Nintendo, and that would be the extra revenue and the downplay of piracy. Because people wouldn't go to all these different sites to get different ROMs for different Nintendo games if they could just buy them on PC. If they could just buy them on Steam, which every PC gamer uses Steam. Like, it's just a fact that every PC gamer will use Steam. You know, it just makes sense that to have put those titles on Steam. You know, and even if it's not like the most recent, like say Switch 1, Switch 2 games, if you put something like, say, I don't know, the NES games on Steam, you know Mario Bros is going to sell. You know the Zelda game is going to sell. And they could test it. They could do a test for it, like they did with mobile, for example, because obviously they made mobile games. But I don't think it'd be beneficial for them entirely, because obviously you'd get the increase of obviously revenue, obviously from PC. You'd obviously get people stop pirating their games so they could just buy them from Steam. But then you also got to remember, it also does then sort of drag down Nintendo's other businesses of obviously their console division, and obviously their own first party like software on their obviously own systems. And also you got to factor in as well, you know, it's just kind of really awkward because Nintendo would have to then learn to develop for PC, which obviously their teams have always been known to just develop for Nintendo consoles exclusively. So that'd obviously take more resources to do the research and development, and that'd be an expenditure. Which yes, I don't doubt that they will make that expenditure back over time, but I do think it would be a risk that Nintendo themselves would not really be interested in taking. Likewise, I do think as well it would obviously have a sort of a side effect on obviously dragging down obviously their console sales and their console market share. And with Nintendo being one of the major players of the console market, I don't think they really want to lose that position. They're not Xbox. Xbox literally lost any like reason to really compete in the market at this point. But you know, Nintendo still has a reason, and people still buy Nintendo hardware to play their games, and that is the largest reason why I don't think that they'll put them on Steam. Do I think they should? I think they could experiment with it. I think that, you know, offering some NES games or Super Nintendo games on Steam just to test see if people will buy them is possible. It is a good idea in my opinion. You know, just to see if there's a market there. But also Nintendo is afraid of cannibalizing its Switch Online sales or Switch Online expansion pack subscriptions and their console sales and game sales. So I don't actually think that they'll do it just to avoid cannibalizing their own business, even though it could potentially lead to more revenue over time. It is a double-edged sword. You'll gain, but you also lose. It's really a double-edged sword. Like I said, you ain't gonna really win either way. You're gonna have some negative come from it and some positive come from it. So yeah. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think about this in the comments down below. Do you agree? Do you think that Nintendo should put their first-party games on Steam? Let me know what you think. If you agree, disagree, let me know in the comments down below. Let me know what you think. You know, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe, like, and try and keep it nice in the comments, because I don't want anyone, like, you know, threatening each other over their opinion on this, because I think it's an interesting topic to discuss. Anyway, I've been EC and I'm signing out. Peace.